Welcome back to the next episode of the Grand Prairie PD podcast. I am here with Whitney. Ordinarily, this is when I would introduce my co-host, Katie, but Katie is off doing kitty things, apparently.
Yeah.
So, we talked about it already, but I apologize in advance if there's any awkward pauses, because
okay.
normally that's when Katie jumps in and says something witty or just really ages himself and we get to laugh at him. But so
We'll work through it.
Well, Whitney, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Whitney Martin. I was telling you earlier how I was named after Whitney Houston.
Right.
I cannot sing. But yeah, so I've been here with the department for about 2 years now. I am a Dallas native, but I've moved around some due to college. My husband's in the military, so I've lived in Colorado.
Oh, cool.
Outside of like Houston area, but now we're back here in North Texas. So
Okay.
yeah.
Every time I hear the word Houston, I get a little bit triggered. I have to ask, are you an Astros fan?
Definitely not.
Oh, cool. Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. You can stay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So what do you do exactly?
So I'm a victim service coordinator and one of them. So we have 2 victim service coordinators for the Grand Prairie Police Department, and I'm one of those. So it's myself and then Jennifer Guzman.
Okay.
She's actually bilingual, which is really awesome for our Spanish-speaking
Sure.
victims. So yeah, I make up one of that half. And in our unit, we also have a volunteer, Roz.
I thought you were going to say the dog.
Oh, Rusty. See, that's a lot of people know Roz associate Rusty too, but
Right.
Roz as well. She's actually our assistant chaplain here, or one of the assistant chaplains for
Right.
Grand Prairie, but she also provides volunteering for victim services, which is really awesome to have her too to support.
Okay. So what exactly is victim services? Because even me being a cop on the street, like obviously we go to calls where people have been victimized, but then we can't take care of the initial call, the initial investigation. You know, I knew from my end right now, I know what detectives do. But honestly, for the longest, I didn't know at all that y'all even existed. And quite frankly, I still don't know a lot of what y'all do.
Sure. So we provide that immediate crisis intervention for victims of crime, and it's pretty much all crimes. So we mostly deal with a person. So when you're thinking homicide, physical assaults, sexual assaults, but we get into, of course, child abuse, domestic violence, all the different family violence cases. But even it can be things such as burglary, robbery. We provide
Really?
services for those too. Letting people know how to access their services, such as counseling, how to go about getting crime victims compensation. For the appropriate cases like family violence, obtaining an emergency protection order
Right.
or filing for a protection order. So we're kind of connecting those persons to what they do have a right to receive and make sure that they're aware of their victims' rights within the state of Texas. That's something that we do as well.
Okay. So like crime victims compensation, for instance, didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Well, explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
'Cause that sounds
Yeah.
like you get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. So with our state, if you are victimized, and there are particular cases, so it's going to be a certain offenses that this would be for. So this wouldn't be for someone stole my iPhone, for an
Okay.
example. I mean, yes, you have been victimized by your
Sure.
iPhone, but it's for the difference of crime. So we're
Right.
talking about things of the assault, homicide, that's what we're kind of talking about with those.
Okay.
So with victims compensation, you can apply to that, but it's the payer of last resort. So what if I wanted counseling based on the trauma that I experienced? I was physically assaulted,
Okay.
maybe like in a fight or something like that, but I have extensive trauma from that.
Mm-hmm.
So victims compensation can actually help pay for my sessions so I can go see a therapist.
Gotcha.
So that's really awesome. Even paying for things like medical bills. I may have had to have surgeries due to something going on from that violence that I experienced. But it can be used in several different ways. Homicide victims, their family members, maybe they need help paying for that funeral on the front end.
Okay.
So it can pay for that, transporting the remains of your loved one to get to where your home is. Those kind of things, victims compensation can come in and pay. But again, it's more so, that payer of last resort. So there are some people that already have things through their job or
Right.
some other type of insurances.
Right.
So it kind of goes into, well, what do you have? Okay, if you don't have those kind of things of support, then the state will absolutely cover that for you. And that's not
Gotcha.
only for Texas residents. It can be someone visiting here from out of state and they experienced and unfortunately had a crime committed to them here. So victims compensation would come in and pay for that. And that's in Pretty much all the states have a form of victims compensation.
No kidding.
For the ones that, if you are in a state that doesn't necessarily have it, I'm going to speak on Texas. If you're like visiting a location that doesn't have some type of compensation, you can actually get assistance through crime victims compensation too.
No way.
So that's really cool as well as a resident of Texas.
So I guess what is your normal threshold? Because like hearing you talk about it, if you're from out of state and you come into Texas and you show up in DFW right now and you just like have to drive in traffic for a while, you might need counseling. Obviously, there's a bar. So, like, well, what's kind of the cutoff as far as like, no, you don't really, because surely, like with any assistance system, someone's going to try to abuse it. I
for
imagine.
sure.
So, what are some of your guidelines, your safeguards against that?
Right. So, looking at the crime itself, so it has to be an offense that is deemed as far as eligible for the victim's compensation. So, as an example that I gave about stealing the iPhone, that wouldn't be a crime that I can say, okay, I need counseling from that because it was so traumatic to go without my phone for an extended period of time.
Gotcha.
So that's one safeguard, is looking at that. But then also following up to see, is this a legitimate case? Has it actually been filed? You can say, well, I did tell the police about it, but did you actually file a report with the police? So we would need a police report number, have an actual report, so we can go back and actually enter that. So that's a part of an application process. So you can't just say, I'm going to apply for this program. You actually have to be able to show that this is a criminal offense. It has been reported to the police, is being investigated. Because that's another part of it too, because you could report something, but maybe that's not something that the police would be able to move forward with, or maybe it's like an unfounded type of case. That would be something, unfortunately, you may not be able to get that compensation for.
Right. How often do you find are you ever the one who's kind of that arbiter making a decision as far as, hey, this is going to qualify or isn't, or it's just you pretty much have set guidelines to go off of?
Right. We have guidelines to go off of, and that's what we would refer people to. And then ultimately it's going to come down to the state, because it's a state program, and it's actually through the Office of the Attorney General for Texas. So
okay. So it takes some of the pressure off you as far as you're not having to sit down and say, hey, I don't believe you, or your phone's not that important.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. And then ultimately, I mean, somebody that really wants to move forward, and if they really want to apply, even though by looking at those, the list of requirements, it looks like you probably are not eligible. But if someone really wants to move forward, they have the right to fill out that application, and the Office of the Attorney General will let them know what their decision is. So you're
kind of just guiding them through as a liaison.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is your position something that most city governments have?
Most police departments do have a version of victim services. Okay. It looks a little bit different depending on the department size and the size of the city, of course. So you may have some units that have a team of victim service coordinators. For Grand Prairie, it's myself and Jennifer, like I said. Some of them have daytime and nighttime workers. Some of them only have one worker because it's like a smaller department.
Sure.
Some departments are so small that there's not an actual department, but there's maybe an officer that has that right to give out the information, making sure that victims have those rights. Because that is something within Texas. You still have to give, like, for the victims' rights. They have a right to know that it is a crime to commit, these certain acts against a person. There's certain things that a victim still has the right to know. Right. So you would just designate an officer to do that depending on the size of your department.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, with your position, are you primarily working in the office, or are y'all ever getting called out to go anywhere?
Sure, we do a little bit of both. We are primarily here at the department because we do a lot of the phone contact, a lot of emails, of course with technology, text messages and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But we do provide on-call services too. So myself and Jennifer, we're on call pretty much 24/7. Yeah, so 24/7, we kind of just split it between ourselves. So when things come up, when you all are out there, when officers are out there and something comes up, maybe someone is going to be taken into custody, there's a child, and maybe there's no other, caregiver, maybe they caught someone and no one else can come to be with the child, or maybe that person just has no one. Mm-hmm. So then victim services can come in and be kind of like a buffer in between. So the child would be with us, so we can help watch the child here at the police department.
Gotcha.
While CPS will be like en route pretty much to come to take custody of the child if they need that. Mm-hmm. And other things too, of course, if there is some type of a tragic event of violence, you need to maybe sit with a family. Maybe someone was just assaulted. Maybe they had to go into immediate surgery. Okay, there are some loved ones that they need some attention too, especially if we're
Right.
talking about like teenagers or like children. Someone needs to sit with them. So again, that would be something we can provide assistance with. A lot of the on-call assistance that we typically would provide will be over the phone. So doing that
Okay.
coordination. So like responding to maybe like a family violence call. There's a situation trying to locate a shelter. So that's something we can help in between to identify what shelter a person can get to, give out some other shelter options instead of just going with maybe one, but
Right.
expanding that for them since we know all the different contacts. And then if everything is full, coordinating with our crisis relief ministry to go through them with crisis response to kind of see maybe is it a possibility this person could qualify for a temporary like hotel 1 or 2 night
Gotcha.
stay in case everything's full. But just kind of helping those immediate crisis intervention, but we can do all that stuff over the phone.
That's awesome. There's so much to that I, as a patrol officer for sure, but even as an investigator, I had no idea that even happened. I'll get cases and I'll be looking, and every once in a while, y'all have like a note on my case. I'm like, I didn't put that there, and I read it, and I'm like, yeah, I reached out to so and so, and again, until I'm talking to you now, even then, I'm just like, okay,
Right,
cool.
yeah,
I guess somebody else has
yeah.
a job that I didn't know about.
yeah, because we do those follow-ups to help out, or even if y'all are out there and you see something and it's like, I saw something and maybe he just kind of didn't want to talk about what was going on with his mom, and I just told him, hey, that he could follow up. So then you'd let us know and we follow up with the person just to let them know, hey, we're here with Victim Services. These are some resources that you could benefit from here in our community. So that's really awesome that we can do that too.
That is cool. You know, you mentioned this a second ago, talking about like hanging out with kids and whatnot, and it's humorous, but in the kind of I guess a cop kind of way, where it's like you see the funny in a bad situation. But you know, if you're in a situation where you're having to take kids either out of a home or just maybe even just give them a ride because
Right.
something's happened. One of the funniest things in the world is if you're on a young shift and trying to watch all the young cops who don't have kids trying to figure out how to get car
The
seats
car seat,
into
yeah.
the squad cars. It just and then you always kind of look around like, where's a guy that like has some wrinkles or looks like he might have some kids, and he comes over and he just shows everybody how to do it.
Yeah, this is how you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Though. I didn't know y'all did that. Now let me ask you: have you always known you wanted to do this kind of work?
Well, I say not always. Since college, yes.
Okay.
So a little bit of background. It would be in my I'm gonna say undergraduate time. I went to Sam Houston State for undergrad.
Okay.
And at that time, I actually wanted to do like forensic science. So
Okay.
growing up, I thought I was either gonna be an actress, but that didn't work out.
Well, I mean you had the name for it.
Hey, Whitney.
Sorry.
Couldn't sing though, but that's okay. So,
You can try now.
Hey,
These are
not
good
gonna do it.
microphones.
I know it would pick it all up, which is why I can't do it. But
You go
so-
viral, get discovered.
I know, right? Get some views and followers. Here we go. But yeah, so I was like, okay, not doing that. Then I was really into science and like nursing. So when I went to Sam Houston State, I was like, I'm going to do forensic science, and I was like, I'm just so into this. And a part of
Thinking
that,
like the CI, it's like the CSI kind of stuff.
right?
Okay.
Absolutely, because I kind of at the same time I was working like I had like a side job as a nurse assistant. So I was like, oh, I'm so
yeah.
into the science part though. I think I really want to do future law enforcement, but through like the science avenue, which is why I was doing
Okay.
forensic science.
Right.
So yeah. But one of the courses, like an elective, was a child abuse and neglect class, just kind of introduce you to what you may end up seeing through forensic science with child abuse. And when I took the course, I was like, oh, child abuse, neglect. Oh, I think I
Right.
need to switch because it was just speaking to me. And
Oh wait, so you took the class and you're like, it made you want to do it more.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
then
no,
it
I was-
switched, right? And which was opposite. Some of the people that were majoring in forensic science, I mean, it was like, oh no, like I wouldn't
Right.
do something. But then once I took that course, I was like, this is what I should be doing. It needs to be something with social services.
Okay.
But I still wanted the law enforcement aspect, which is how I switched my major to victim services. So at Sam Houston State, we actually had a victim services major
No
that
kidding.
you could do, and it was through the criminal justice school. But I didn't want to major in CJ. Like that's not. I mean, not to knock on CJ, but that's not what I wanted to major in.
It's not cool enough.
Right. I was like, okay, victim service, this is what I want to do. Yeah. So I went with it. And then it connected to my history. So all through like my childhood, I actually grew up with family violence.
Oh, okay.
Extensive with my dad being on drugs, and we would have to call the police. I called the police.
Jeez.
My mom would call the police. So I was used to the police showing up at my house or going to visit my dad in jail or seeing him on the street. It was just this whole never-ending cycle of violence and neighborhood violence, too, with people robbing our home and things like that. But it would relate to my dad's drug use. But I hid that as a secret. So I never talked about that until it was actually time for me to, until I got to college. I mean, I kept it, funny. Some people don't think it's funny, but to me it's funny. I kept the secret so long that at my high school graduation, I heard a voice say, "Hey, baby girl," and it was my dad. And at that time, he was still on drugs, so he was like out there, like on the streets out there. So I heard him yell out, "Hey, baby girl," and I was just like, no, my secret in my head. I was like, no, my secret is about to be exposed. And I remember some other students kind of like looked around like, who's
so when you
random?
say,
no,
tell me
you're
to
fine.
Shut up if you don't want to talk
No,
about
you're
this.
fine, you're fine.
When you say your secret, like obviously you're not going around talking about the fact that, you've been witness to abuse and whatnot.
Right.
But like, are you keeping the existence of your father at all a secret?
Right. No, well, I would talk about my dad, so I would acknowledge dad, but I wouldn't talk about the things that happened with dad. Okay. So, like, when I was little, like, my dad would take us with him to, like, the drug house. So
Gotcha.
I grew up, like, and that was just the earliest I can remember is my dad. I would go to the drug house with my dad. He would get his drugs, and we just wouldn't talk about it. Same thing with my mom, like, the back and forth. You hear the fighting. It's so many different. It's kind of picking and choosing what to talk about.
Right.
It's regarding the secret. So instead of trying to picking and choose, we just wouldn't talk about it at all.
Gotcha.
So he was kind of like an enigma. We know he exists and we know he's there, but then he's not there.
This is one of those things that when someone mentions a specific,
it.
They're like, oh, yeah, I actually don't know anything about her dad. Or kind of like that one aunt, and no one knows what she does for a living.
I know.
But she always has money.
Yeah. I'm like, what? And we would do this whole thing when he would be in jail. We'd be like, oh, yeah, he's on vacation. Or he's from Chicago. So we'd be like, oh, yeah, he's in Chicago. And it actually would work. I mean, people just wouldn't explain. They would just be like, oh, okay,
Because what do you say that? You tell me your dad's in Chicago. So, okay.
All right, that's
I call you a liar.
I know. But I really tried to keep, which is why in high school when that moment happened, I was like, you will not air this out because I have kept the secret this long. You will not. So I actually, when he yelled out, "Baby girl," I didn't even acknowledge my own dad. Like I didn't look up. I was just like, I'm not doing it because I'm not ready for this.
Because you were just afraid the state he was going to be in, everyone was going to say,
yes, we're going to see how he is. I had I call it the close encounter. So I spent the night at a friend's house, and her father and my friend and her father, they were dropping me back off home. And I remember, and I grew up in Oak Cliff, by the way.
Okay.
And there are certain parts of Oak Cliff that were just like awesome and nice, but then there were certain parts of Oak Cliff that were like, kind of sketchy. So I was in the kind of sketchy part of Oak Cliff. So I was like, okay, just drop me off just right here. And I had a whole pattern, like, just drop me off on the side so I can kind of hurry up and get in. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, my dad was actually coming up. And man, he looked so awful. So I was just like, I'll get out right now. I can just walk. Just walk. And they were like, no, we can just drive. I was like, no, I'll get out right now. And sure enough, they haired up. I'm sure they were like, what?
Yeah.
And I know, in my head, I was like, I know they had to see him, but they didn't say anything. So it was just like, let me get out the car and go. And I mean, when they left, I was like, Dad, you can't just like show up like that. People can't see you. I mean, we would joke about it. It's funny now because but during that time, it was so serious. Like,
I bet, yeah.
Don't just show up like this, especially with his history of stealing or other people to get back at him or if he owed money and things like that. So we had to be careful, but that still went into the secrecy type thing.
Right.
So by the time graduation happened, I was like, I got to keep that. So then when I got to college and I took that course, it spoke to me in that way. Gotcha. I was like, wow, this is speaking to some of the things that I experienced as a child. And it was through that course that I started talking about my history and what I went through growing up with family violence and different neighborhood violence and things like that. It was that course that opened it up. And then I made that decision. I want to do victim services. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a victim advocate. I want to be able to talk with people and kind of let them know where they can get assistance from and help from. I remember talking to my mom about that switch because I know she was kind of thinking I was going to maybe do the whole nursing track thing, but she actually mentioned, she was like, do you remember that there was a time I had to go and get help, and I went to the Salvation Army and I spoke with an advocate about things going on with your dad. And I was like, I don't remember that. And she was like, you were so little, but I had to, bring you with me, but I was needing help, and it was an advocate that provided assistance. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Well, that's what I want to do, Mom.
Right.
And we just rolled
That's awesome.
with it.
That's really, really full circle.
Yeah. Now, present day, I do like to say, especially bringing up my history of my past, my father is off drugs. He's clean. He's in sobriety. He's addressing his own past traumas, actually.
Okay.
He's a veteran. So I'm glad to be able to have a relationship with him now. In the past, I did not. It was kind of off and on. But he's off drugs. He's living on his own downtown Dallas. I mean, it's just night and day.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How long has he been clean for?
Oh, goodness. Maybe, I'm going to say almost 10 years.
Wow.
He did have a couple relapses, which is a part of recovery or whatever. But that's, I'm saying almost 10 years, but my dad is like 70. So that's like a long time of drug use. And he started as a teenager. So I'm so glad that now full circle we're able to have that time where we can, because we're not going to make back as far as making back up. We can't go back in time or whatever. And he wasn't able to really parent me, but we can have a friendship now, which is really beautiful to have, and know that I have forgiven him. He has asked for forgiveness. He has acknowledged the things from the past, which is really awesome that I was able to get to that point. Because it's like I never really, I guess in college you kind of don't think about it. It's like, okay, whatever, that's my situation. But until you have that moment where you can connect with someone and have someone acknowledge what they did, it's like, whoa, thank you so much. It kind of helped me out because there were some internal type of struggles based on me keeping that secret that was really hard for me.
Right.
So he helped in that way. So, yeah.
You think that, do you feel like y'all have more of a peer type of relationship now?
Yeah.
Just as a result of him kind of not being around for some of that stuff? Definitely,
absolutely. And what's so cool is since he's addressing his past traumas and things like that, when we're talking, you would almost think it's like kind of, I'm going to say a therapy session, but based on how we talk with each other, we're using those different types of terminology, which kind of makes sense in both of us as far as healing. Even my own self.
How do you mean? What terminology?
So when we're talking about, we use language like, okay, your triggers, identifying that, what's coming up. Okay, there's some thinking errors that we have to go back and address. But it'll be like myself and my dad, like we're talking like that.
Right.
So we're identifying those things. We'll bring up things. We'll openly talk about boundaries, or like, yeah, that doesn't. Well, you know what? That doesn't work for me. That's one of my boundaries. So I can easily say that because he's working on himself and addressing that. And then I know that I've done the work because I went through counseling my own self. I started at Sam Houston through the counseling center to work on those things. I was like, okay, because I do want to go and say full force with victim services, but if you yourself have some things that you have experienced, if you're going to enter this field, it's going to bring it back up for sure. So
when I was curious, because you hear kind of some of the story you're telling, unfortunately, is not super rare. In the sense that a lot of kids, unfortunately, are in this situation, and sometimes you hear a similar account to what you've kind of laid out, but people tend to go like the counseling route, and maybe it's just because that's who I've spoken to.
Right.
But what drove you towards victim services as opposed to, you get help from a counselor? I want to, be a counselor. Was there like a big differentiation, or you kind of saw them the same, or what?
It was a difference. So with the counseling, it's like over and over building that relationship. But I kind of didn't want to, be stuck in that role. But I wanted the difference of, okay, this is going to be another person I can work with on the front end. Okay. And kind of help them get and access to certain things. Like in my head, I was already thinking of, I'll be the person that a cop will be like, hey, you know who you need to speak with? You can speak with Whitney Martin, and she'll kind of go over some things, whatever you need to access, like that initial person. And it probably connects to, I can remember one time when the cops were at our home. And things have changed. This is like the 90s, so growing up in the 90s. When there was one occasion when the cops were at my home, they're there, and there's like all this yelling going on between still my mom and my dad, which that was normal. But now the police were present to see like what's happening, And some of the, not all, but some of the officers, how they spoke to my mom, it really wasn't empathetic, or from that compassionate view. And I started thinking to myself, no one is really like at least talking to her in that way. It's just more so focused on, y'all got to get it together.
This is a job.
This is the job this woman here. I mean, we knew that he couldn't stay. So a lot of times that would happen. Just get your stuff. You can't be here for tonight. Like, you're going to have to go. There's no way we can leave you here with her. And then y'all are doing this. Then y'all are going to call us back out here. It would be that kind of list, kind of quick. But I never saw a person inserted. So like victim services, which kind of makes sense, though. This is 90s. So a lot of things are totally different now with a lot of police
Did they even have
departments.
victim services back then?
Not in that sense. You would have to have an officer that's sensitive to that particular, they're just so aware.
But the state resources were available. They just didn't really have the liaison role.
Right. It would be more so during that time heavy in the community versus inside of what we have now in the police department.
Gotcha.
So when I connect that, I was like, oh, okay, because that would have been something that my mom would have been able to benefit from. It would have been the cops left, and then it would be a person to, oh, yeah, okay, I'm just following up on an incident that recently happened. I'm just calling to go over something.
Right.
How can we support you? She didn't have that.
Right.
So if I think about that full circle now, oh, okay, being in that role, that's probably what I would rather do. Even though, I've always had a healthy, I would say, view on law enforcement. But in the beginning, when I was little, I didn't understand those dynamics of they still have a balance too. They still have a job. They still have to secure. Those type of things too, and for safety.
I was going to ask if that kind of jaded your view towards law enforcement at all. Given that you're a kid, and I complete just an imagination on my part because I didn't have these types of situations, but you're seeing this bad situation happen. The cops show up. That you're like, okay, everything's going to be fine now. And then maybe you see your mom not getting talked to the way you hoped that the people that were going to come in and save the day were going to talk to her. I was wondering if that created any kind of animosity or standoffishness towards law enforcement.
A little bit, but it would be like half and half. It's like, yes, I can trust the police to help, but not all the way.
Right.
They're going to, which would be great. It's just come get my dad and make him go. So it's thank you. The cops made my dad leave. So then that is I'm so excited because the police helped me out, or go jail. They have my dad locked up. I'm happy that he's locked up because he needs to stay there. But then the other side of that is, but I didn't like how you spoke to my mom. So it would be those type of, I would say customer service, but that what's missing is the empathy.
Just
and
operating
the compassion.
outside the black and white lines of the law. So
Absolutely.
You can trust they're going to, if it's on paper, they're going to do what they have to do, but that's pretty much as far as you're going to get.
Yeah, we're not going to go outside of that. And then also, bringing up, culturally, there was some neighborhood type things too, right? So in our neighborhood, it's not like you just automatically trust the police.
Right.
So that in itself, within me, I knew that would be an internal type of a conflict. So culturally speaking, it would be, I'm not going to 100% trust the police because they may have an ulterior motive. But then I have this secret, so I know, but the police helped me out because they came and got my dad when he's doing all this stuff and he's high and stuff. But I can be around at the same time friends that's talking about the cops and not trusting them. But again, they don't know that secret that the police helped me out by coming to my house several times.
A lot of peer pressure there, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Did you come across any kind of pushback whenever if you're growing up in a neighborhood that's not particularly friendly towards police, you're not the only one who saw your mom not be talked to the right way. So I imagine other members of your family might hold similar sentiments. You jumping straight to, hey, I work for a police department now. Do you get any kind of pushback or weird reactions to that?
No, I don't actually. And if someone does, they probably just leave it to themselves.
Right.
But my family has been
Are you
used
the type
to
that would cuss them out?
During that time, yeah. I am a new person, praise the Lord. But during that time, I had a mouth on me. It was almost just during that time, it was I didn't care. This is what I'm doing and accept it. I was very, full force, self-righteous, outspoken.
I imagine.
That was me.
Yeah, it's obvious you believe in it.
Right.
Do you? I imagine you, now that you're into your adult years, you've had time to kind of reflect a lot on the past. Do you feel like you would have had a drastic difference in the trajectory of your life, or at least maybe the enjoyment of those years, had someone had your role available to you?
I would say so. And I wouldn't say necessarily me, but definitely my mom. Looking back, I would have absolutely qualified for, a CPS case. It would have been me on the case. Or
Right.
I used to be a forensic interviewer.
Oh, man.
So when I even think about that, and I was a forensic interviewer for about 3.5 years.
That's a tough job.
Yeah. And some of the children I interviewed were considered like drug endangered
Right.
children or children that have been exposed to drugs. So
Right.
it's like laughable in my head. Like, I went to the drug house with my dad. So
Right.
like those kind of things will come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could have, because I would have been able to then be set up with counseling and be able to talk about some of the things. Even through my church, being able to get that out and get the spiritual support. But again, we were holding that secret. So
Right.
I wouldn't say it kind of tied the hands of those professionals, but also we didn't tell the professionals. So even when the police would come,
Oh, gotcha.
we didn't really tell the police everything that happened before they showed up. It would just be more so now they're there and they see them fighting, but they didn't see all of what was going on with the fight, during the fight, before the...
And they're not exactly going out of their way to ask.
No.
So it's just like, okay, you just get him out, do what I want.
Correct. Which is why, when I'm talking with people that want to pursue this field in particular with victim services, is like definitely address personal things. If there's some personal things you need to address those, because it's going to come up. And then being mindful with your interactions, because every time I'm working with people, I'm thinking to myself, how are they experiencing Whitney in this moment? Like, this is a real human being. They have value. This person has value. So I'm seeing them. And from a spiritual standpoint, as a believer, it's like, hey, they are image bearers of Christ. So how am I going to treat this person right now?
Right.
I had to grow to that. But yeah, that helps me even more so. But definitely if I had those things in place earlier, it would have helped me. If anything, it would have just kind of shortened how much other work I had to do on the back end.
Right, yeah. You mentioned, you kind of glossed over it, but you mentioned being a forensic interviewer. My only familiarity with that profession or that job is like victims of child abuse.
Yeah.
Getting interviewed or seeing a homicide, that sort of. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. I did interviews for law enforcement as well as requested interviews through Child Protective Services.
Okay.
So anytime there was a sexual abuse allegation through CPS, they're trained not to question the children.
Right.
I actually worked for CPS for some time, so that's how you're trained. You're not supposed to ask those questions because you want the professionals.
And for the most part, we're not either.
Right, absolutely.
Why is that?
Because there's a certain way that you want those children questioned in a trained way, because you don't want them to be, they're easily suggestible. So we don't want them to be set up to start talking about things and maybe it's suggestive in the interview, because you have been trained to ask those questions in a certain way to keep it open-ended, especially when we're thinking about ultimately prosecution. We want to be mindful of how we're asking those questions in a way that's going to help in the event this does end up going to court, as far as having that evidence with the child's words.
Right, and especially for our civilian listeners, what you're talking about is if a child is questioned in a certain way that basically they're led, because kids will respond to positive cues.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times, especially abused kids, if they think, hey, I'm going to make this adult figure happy by giving this answer, generally they're going to give that answer, and that goes to court, and the defense brings it up, and it's like, no, that didn't actually happen. They just wanted to make you happy they've been through this traumatic event.
Yeah.
And so the training y'all go through is to kind of alleviate some of that.
Absolutely. And it's research-based. So having the research-based methods, that in itself also stands up in court. Okay. Because we want the person to be held accountable. Of course, the forensic interviewer, in that role, I was the neutral person. So I'm neutral. Sure. I'm not a lie detector. I'm just asking these questions, but I'm going to ask it in a way that's not suggestive and non-leading, which is the goal. I don't want to be leading. I don't want to be suggesting. So we need to have that here and have it recorded, have it on tape as well, which, again, benefits the court process. Yeah.
Did you, going into those interviews, did you have an idea of what allegations were, what the situation was, or you're just, I'm going to sit down and kind of ask these generic questions? At
the Child Advocacy Center I worked for, it definitely was not blind interviews. We knew what we were walking into. Okay. And that actually helps you as a interviewer. It helps you out with your questionings to kind of know what's in that background, because it's going to be different if I'm talking to a child that witnessed a homicide versus severe physical abuse. I mean, my questions are going to be a little bit different. So that helps me out as an interviewer, too, on how to prepare my questions.
Right. Now, having responded to some of the calls involving kids, I think for most of us, kids are the kind of the soft spot. Especially like for myself, I had kids real young. I would leave some of the calls where we're not supposed to get into those details. We're not supposed to ask a lot of the questions. But it's like I can see some of what's happening, so your imagination kind of fills in the blanks. But you leave those calls, and you're just like I need a break. Like I need to forget that, get past that. I imagine it's got to be hard doing the interviewing side as well.
Yeah.
Do you ever just leave just feeling spent?
So I do through that. I would do a lot of compartmentalization. So I would have a certain okay, this is the box that this is going to go in for my brain, just to kind of help me process it. It's easier for me to talk about it now. It's different if I was viewing the material, which only time that would happen is if I needed a child to identify themselves on something. Unfortunately, especially when we have cases with child pornography, and if there's an unknown, and maybe we need to.
That's something that you would do.
Sometimes,
wow.
it didn't happen. It did not happen a lot, but sometimes it did. Or if it would be maybe like a self post when we're thinking of trafficking, and I have those images, and the detective is needing that verified. But again, we don't want the detective asking the questions from this child, so it would be me as the interviewer that's going to do it.
Right.
But that's also helping out the detective with what they're needing. Like, hey, I need to know. Is this her? I mean, pretty much, is this her? Right. Now, we have ways of helping, because you can bring dignity to that room by having sanitized photos. We can use sanitized photos where they're not
edited?
It's not edited, but there's something that's covered. So depending on what's on that picture, more so we want the child to identify themselves, but do they have to see certain body parts, right?
Yeah.
So that part would be sanitized, but the point is that you? And they can look at themselves. Okay, yes, that is. But we need to capture that on the recording during the interview, so they can show, okay, well, they did identify that that's them, but who wants to look at certain parts of their body?
Yeah, and I'm sure some of that would be kind of making them relive.
Absolutely. The re-victimization, that's not what we want to do, but that in itself, I mean, doing the interview, absolutely, that can be.
I can't imagine how it wouldn't.
Right, which is another reason why you would have the forensic interview, is you can bring everyone. That's I say everyone, but those that are involved in the case, they can come together instead of waiting, and you have this child and parent caregiver traveling around. So you can have the detective present, you can have the CPS worker present, and you can have your prosecutor there in the same room watching my interview, which is really helpful. That was the whole point of having a child advocacy center, to have like a one-stop shop where you go to this one place, everyone can do what they need, get the interview done. And then also with our CAC, a lot of CACs have this too, where you have counseling is already there too. You have family advocacy.
All in the same
same, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And at our CAC, we actually had, which is the Child Advocacy Center, we had our SANERS, we had a clinic.
No kidding.
Yeah, so since we had a clinic there, a child can come, they can have a SANE exam, they can have their sexual assault exam, and then they can have their interview as well. So it's like a one-stop shop. That way you're not sending this family around to all these different people, all these different professionals, talking about things over and over and over. It kills that, which is really awesome.
Right. That's awesome. I'll tell you what, man, I think you do all the jobs I would not do. I think you had you wanted to get into the CSI work, and it's like that's something I even see it on TV, and I'm just like that's gross.
See, I thought it was so cool. That's
how my wife is. She thinks that stuff is just neat.
Let's just try it out. When I lived in Colorado, because my husband was in the military, I lived in Colorado Springs. And during that time, I was like, okay, maybe I can, because I still was doing victim services and I was doing victim advocacy. But when we moved, so I left my job. I was working at a domestic violence shelter here.
Okay.
But when we moved, I mean, of course, I keep that job because we've moved now. And I was trying to think of, do I want to really stay? And I even thought, I was like, you know what, maybe I could try policing. Like, let me do law enforcement. I actually thought about that.
Like, no being a
Yes,
cop?
absolutely. Oh, and I was like, here we go, let's go. Colorado Springs PD, let's do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like, let's go, all in. And I went on a ride along. I mean, in Colorado too, different environment, different climate.
Right.
And I remember one of the calls we went on, it was family violence.
Right.
And
Which is almost every shift.
I know. I'm like, what? So to actually see what's going on, and my mentor, because they give you like a mentor. So I had a mentor at the time that pretty much like, I don't want to say making sure that you really want to do it, but that's pretty much.
A mentor through the police application process?
Yeah, just to be like, is this what you, which is why I was doing the ride along, because like you got to do the ride along.
So you got into the process.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I did my psychological like.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, I was like, this is what we doing, because I actually had the goal in mind was to still end up doing things specific to victims, but
Right.
being more like I don't say like a case study expert, but like that pretty much.
Okay.
An expert in a particular field, but through the police department.
Gotcha.
As an officer. That was going to be like a goal. But once I did that ride along, still the same thing happened. I was like, oh, I would rather just stay here with this person that we just came. But now it's like on to the next. But that's what it felt
That's
like
exactly
to
what
me.
it is. Yeah.
I was like, oh, but he's still there.
Yeah.
I mean, I ended up becoming a victim advocate there in Colorado.
Okay.
And this same person that I went out during that ride along on ended up becoming my client through victim services
cool is that?
in the community. I was like,
That's awesome.
that's so cool.
That's really cool, because that's one of the hardest parts about our job is, you know, you show up and you see these people in these terrible situations, and then you leave, and in your mind they're still in these terrible situations, and over the years, you know, kids like yourself have probably got themselves out of it, have,
Right.
you know, gone on to be successful, but in your mind you've just got, you know, 10 or 15 years of these kids. They're still in your brain, they're still there, you know,
Yeah.
even though they're not. So it's really cool to get to see kind of see how it works out. Man. Well, it's pretty heavy subject. Is there anything like funny that happens in like, do you ever get people calling, like, for instance, like the compensation thing?
Oh,
Since I heard that, I
yeah.
was like, surely someone calls about just some stupid stuff trying to get money.
Yeah, or just like knowing that they have already been denied, but it's like, I'm going to try again. Or like maybe it would be like, so hit and run. Hit and run is a qualifiable offense.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that crime is a hit and run. That would be typically, you know, something you could apply for, and it would be eligible. So I've had a couple of funny calls with that. It would be more so, hey, yeah, I just got hit. I was trying to get, you know, that compensation. I was told I could just call, get that check.
Just say it like that?
Yeah. I was like, well, it doesn't really work like that. Or in my verification process, because, I mean, that's why I mentioned you got to have an actual police report.
Right.
I remember one in particular. I went back, do their research, let me call and see. And there was a call note that said, a caller called to say that they were hit by someone. Cops show up. There's no one there. And then I
Right.
talked to the person. Well, I'm looking at the report. It says that there was no one there. Like, an officer made an incident report just to show that there's no one here. And the person told me, well, yeah, I mean, I drove off. I wasn't just going to sit there. Okay, well, it wasn't really reported.
Right,
And the
yeah.
person thought, well, I did report because I called. I was like, no,
that's not how that
that's not how it works. So, I mean, things like that. But we definitely get calls like, hey, I'm about to, typically like rent type things. So I'm about to get kicked out of my place. And I was told I could call this number, you can give me a check. And I can go ahead and just stay here, that it'll be things like that. So either
Right.
we're going to pay your rent, or we're going to get something done where I can just hand you a check. But it's
Right.
literally the police department is going to give you the check.
Right.
So that's where we have to,
That's funny.
smooth things out, do the communication. And it makes in your head, you want to, like, oh, I wish we were giving out checks. Oh, here you
Right,
go.
yeah.
Money. That's not how it works.
And you ever just want to be like, are you like, are you?
No, there have been times I have had to put the call on hold just to like, did that really? Okay. All right, let me get back on here. Oh, I will say something funny. So there's a Grand Prairie in Canada.
Okay.
And so our other victim service coordinator, Jennifer Guzman, she told me this. And I remember she told me that. And I just, you know, you just put something in the back of your brain, you
Yeah.
don't think about it.
Yeah, thanks for that random bit.
Right.
I'm never going to use.
See,
Yeah.
it's like, what? Okay. Randomly, I get a call, victim services. I'm doing all this research. I'm trying to look and find the case and find out the detective. I'm like, I cannot find this person. Who is this person? Let's get this person. Really needs some help.
Yeah.
And they're going to be victimized again. I mean, I'm going through all of this. I did like a whole day of extensive victim services work. It was in Canada. I was like, oh, you need the victim services in Canada. It's like a whole different set. And the person said, I wonder why you sounded weird.
I was wondering. I was like, did you not like notice that they were super polite? It's like, you can't be from here.
They were super polite, but we actually get a lot of polite people.
Really?
Yeah, probably because they're calling it need. It's like, I need something.
Too. Yeah.
But yeah, he was just like, yeah, you sounded weird. I'm like, oh,
that's so funny.
I do sound. Oh yeah, because I'm a Texan. I'm from Texas. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm like, this whole time. I mean, I really legit spent a full day.
That's funny.
For a Canada case. I did help out though because I was able to make a report with one of their police departments there.
Oh, nice.
And I connected with a social worker there. They were gonna do a follow up. So
somebody gets a case. They're like, yeah, somebody from Texas took care of most of it for you.
What?
Cool.
I know. So yeah, lesson: ask first to make sure. Grand Prairie. Which Grand Prairie are you calling for?
That's so funny. Yeah, you mentioned the car accident, like the hit and run stuff.
Yes.
One of the little bit that I always find funny, like whenever I have a rookie, I always tell them like we've got probably between 2:30 to 5 in the morning-ish, you'll get calls that are hit and runs. If they're on a roadway, they're probably legit.
Yeah.
But you'll get them a lot of times in apartment complexes, and I always tell them like, just watch when we get there. You're going to notice something about the car. And sure enough, like last time it happened, we went out there, and front of the car is all smashed up. You know, they're in the apartment complex. Supposedly, someone just came flying through, smashed them, took off, and our victim was supposed to be waiting in the apartment. We walk up, and I forget who it was that I had, but they're like looking around the car, like, yeah, it's all smashed up. I'm like, yeah. Anything else kind of seem weird about it? I don't know. Well, it's pulled in the correct way. Like they pulled into their own apartment building against the building. Obviously, nobody hit it. They hit something and then came home and parked it. And like you look in the car, it's full of beer bottles and stuff like that. It's like try to knock on the guy's door, he's out. But that happens all the time.
Wow. Yeah. And we've gotten the hit and runs that once we read through the report, it'll explain that, and they'll be like, yeah, well, I did it as a hit and run. Yeah, no, it's not deemed a hit.
It was a hit and run, but you were the suspect.
Right. This is not. We get suspect calls too, but our department is victim services, and sometimes we'll have suspects on cases to call.
For what?
It could be a mixture of things. Either trying to get information, or they're trying to make sure that they can we do something about this case? And it's like, yeah, no, we're not talking about that. Or wanting to file charges, which happens a lot. I want to press charges on them. Then it's just this, a back and forth. So
we deal with that all the time.
So we get those calls too. It's a good mixture with victim services, in the community. Even it could be very random. I had someone call to talk with me about the changes in society. I've had calls about how the neighborhood makeup and who we're electing. I mean, it's just a good mixture. And sometimes we get our from our more seasoned community. They just maybe want to just talk to someone, And it's like, why not? They want to tell a joke or two. It's just like, okay, why not? Let's just do it.
He's got the age-old, what do you want me to do about this question?
Like, okay, this was victim services.
Right, yeah.
Like, I know that. That's why I call. Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm here. And a lot of times they'll just say, thank you so much for listening.
Although, in their defense, the name is super generic.
That's true.
So maybe if you were more specific, like, we only do X, like, just make your name
These
just
crimes.
a list of things that you do.
Please access our website so you can see the crimes listed. Yeah.
That's funny. Or maybe you just need like one of those automated messages.
Oh,
there's a doctor's office that one of my kids uses. I hate calling them just because I know I'm buying into 15 minutes of an automated message before
you even get some. Yeah, we don't have that. That's the luxury of calling us. You're going to get one of us. You're going to get a live person.
That could suck for y'all.
Yeah.
Oh well. Well, I think we're about out of time. But before I get off, I know you mentioned that you wanted to plug. So I completely forget what it was. It's something that y'all are doing in October, right?
Yeah. So with this being the month of October, this is actually nationally Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Right.
And we had a visual earlier actually last week, which is really awesome and successful. Later on this month, we'll be having a training So just with the Grand Prairie Police Department, something that we're trying to grow within victim services is being able to offer things like different trainings for certain type of awareness things. So it's really awesome that through this department we can do things like that.
Okay.
And knowing when certain things come up that you can go through your local police department to get some training, which is really awesome.
Even members of the department don't always know.
Yeah, it's not just for us here internally, it's for the community. We're actually having interpersonal violence, the impact of family violence and things like that on the family and children. So that's something that we get to have later on this month. But that's going to be things that we want to continue to do through the department, because that's, and not just domestic violence. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month because this does happen. We're talking 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, or some people say 1 in 6. But when you're thinking about statistics like that, it's like we want to get that awareness out there. But we provide services for all crimes too, so not to limit ourselves. So if there's something going on in the community, you just need to kind of figure out who to talk to, who they can be directed to. Victim services can help out. So even if you're not sure, we're more than willing to assist and provide services, even through other departments. We've had some other victim like advocates reach out to us and just kind of as kind of like a liaison, just kind of help. Hey, there's a person that I'm kind of thinking maybe they came through Grand Prairie. What can they do, or what do you have there? So that's something we can help out with.
Awesome. And so where would, if because I know we're not real sure when this is going to air, but if someone's curious about these trainings, where would they go?
Just go to our Grand Prairie Police Department website, grandprairiepolice.org, and there's a section for victim services, and you can see that with the different departments. But also, if you just clicked on events, because we have a part for just events that we have, if you click on that, you'll see the different things that we offer. Okay,
awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing this. Even though you walked in, you realized Katie wasn't here. You're like, oh, this is going to be a little awkward.
I know.
It wasn't bad, though.
It wasn't. It was
time.
this. I didn't have to, it was just that. Yeah.
I would dare to say it was even better.
Okay. No comment on that part, Katie. Okay, that was,
He's not going to listen to this. All right, Whitney. Well, I certainly appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure,
I'm sure I'll see you at work here.
All right. Yes. Thank you.
Until next time, guys.